So my name's Morgan Ashurst. I am the head of media for Esports Insider and the newly elected chair for Women in Esports. My background in esports, I guess, splits into two. So from an industry perspective, a work experience side, more so core marketing. So at the moment, head of media for ESI, was the head of marketing for the British Esports Association prior to that, and Fierce PC, which is a gaming PC brand before. And then the other kind of side of the experience is more competitive. So I used to compete in COD from an early age, attended events from the age of around 16 for 5 to 6 years, and then decided to kind of focus on work from that point onwards. So it was mixed teams, co-ed teams, also female teams, and kind of established myself in that scene, used the experience I had from there to then work in esports full time. So the last 3 years since we've been running at Women in Esports, we've more so been having conversations around future planning, some of the bigger kind of objectives that we're wanting to achieve as an initiative. I believe the next 3 years for us at Women in Esports is actioning a lot of the stuff that we've been discussing. And I think naturally some of the larger topics around toxicity, creating a safer space, they all require a lot of building blocks in order for us to implement long-standing change within the industry. I think if we're going to kind of break it down per key pillar, the ones I would most like to focus on is safer space, for example, whether that's running our own activations, creating safer spaces or communities within the tournaments that we're running, using that knowledge, using that best practice to then communicate to other event organisers and tournament organisers on what they can do to create a more inclusive environment. I think on the tournament side as well, a big issue that we see nowadays is pro teams don't have any females on their rosters. Anything that we're kind of able to do to create a platform or further visibility for females wanting to compete is really important. I think initially we'll start towards the grassroots side. So essentially creating tournaments, introducing people to competitive environments. So hopefully down the line, we can see more females in the future compete on a main stage and scouts start to take notice of that. Again, we've got lots of future announcements that are coming. So I'm quite broadly speaking about this at the moment, but I think between tournament, safer space, and educating people on how to be more inclusive is going to be, a clear part of our vision moving forward. So I've been involved in Women in Esports since the beginning. Me and Alice both launched this when I was working at British Esports still. Essentially, it started off as a content campaign, so more just to kind of spread awareness or celebrate talent that exists already within the industry, with, I guess, then the main objective of getting more women involved from an industry perspective or competitive standpoint. Whereas kind of seeing it grow from a campaign into a fully kind of blown initiative has been really, really special. Because it's no longer me and Alice. We now have a full-time Women in Esports manager. We also have 11 committee members, so all of which are, experienced in different elements of the industry. And the nice thing is that, me and Alice have said from the offset that we are not the two people to implement long-standing change on the industry, because it's impossible for two people to achieve that. And the fact that we've brought all of these people together, looking at larger aims, key objectives, and I guess the true art of collaboration is more what kind of empowers or inspires us on a daily basis. So going from two people discussing a concept to now it being so much bigger than that and a community is really, really special. It's tough to pinpoint an exact favourite moment of being involved in Women in Esports so far. I think, lightly touching on the answer before is being able to collaborate with other women within the industry. You always come off those calls feeling so motivated and inspired by each other. And it's nice to see that other people within the industry have similar objectives to us, and we're all working with each other towards the same goals. So I think, every time that we hop on those calls, it genuinely is really exciting, and really nice to have other people involved in what we're doing. So I think it comes down to all of those kind of bite-sized conversations that you'll have with people all of which are building blocks to getting where we want to be long term in terms of our objectives and goals. Again, it is really tough to highlight a particular moment. I think there's a lot more exciting things to come, and the people that we have on board is partly why or how all of this is all possible at the moment. And those experiences or interactions with equally passionate people in the industry is probably what keeps us driven or what drives us forward in general. So I'd probably say that. I think the initiative is important to me, or the whole reason we wanted to put this together in the first place is my experience of being a competitor from a young age. It didn't come without its hardships, and there's always been some bold statements that have kind of been thrown around the industry, and how are we able to, or why are we working towards inspiring more women to get involved in an industry that isn't inclusive or accepting of everyone for who they are? So for me, it's trying to provide more opportunities, trying to advise or give advice or educational kind of tools for people to be able to feel like they belong. And whilst we say we're women in esports, and that just comes down to women and marginalised genders, there is a much larger kind of vision for making things more inclusive. And I think it's not fair to say to women or anyone to get involved in the esports industry by saying you must have a backbone. It would have been something I would have said to myself way back when, but actually it's not fair to say you've got to be a certain character to survive in esports. You have to be confident, you have to be strong-minded, you can't be insecure. Whereas, actually you should be able to enter as you are, as who you are. And I think this is why the message that we're trying to promote is so important to, future kind of esports enthusiasts in general. If I had unlimited resources, there's so much I'd like to tackle, but with being a non-profit, it's obviously relatively difficult to kind of execute plans as and when. I think the main thing for me, with my competitive background, would be providing more opportunities in tournaments for women to be seen. Yes, we have the likes of Game Changers and established pro leagues for females in CSGO. But what would be nice is to be able to build those foundations to have that similar structure in other games. Again, I think some publishers are more active than others, and us kind of setting those foundations or really trying to bring out the communities from a younger age or an earlier level, it's quite important for us to be able to do more in the competitive sphere for esports. And I think on top of that, in terms of community, as mentioned before, I feel so empowered and inspired every time I speak to other women or female leaders within the space. And I think it's not often that a large majority of women will attend industry-based events or will do panel talks. It's always kind of a similar demographic that's appearing on those stages. And I think to be able to provide a networking event or an atmosphere where everyone feels welcome is really important as well. So I think covering both competitive and industry elements, it would be nice to do something to cater towards both of them. But yeah, the sky would be the limit. And, fortunately, I think we're starting to have some larger conversations about what we're able to do moving forward. But yeah, I think that's where I would start with unlimited budget for sure. I think there's so many events that we can get involved in as women in esports. As mentioned before, Safer Space is such a huge conversation at the moment on how we're able to make things more inclusive or more diverse for everything that's being ran. So I think, in a sense, being able to do more activations or pop-ups at future industry events would be amazing. I also think, as mentioned before, it'd be great to do some more tournaments and competitions in whatever kind of capacity we can. But at the same time, really kind of promote and endorse other people that are already doing great work within this space. We're big advocates for kind of seeing best practice across Twitter and social media. I know the NUL or collegiate esports companies have been doing some great stuff for women and marginalised genders in terms of tournaments, and just really kind of advocating for everyone that wants to make a positive kind of change on the industry is important to us. So whatever capacity that kind of fits within, we're not just going to promote what we're doing and look at what other people are doing and kind of use that as learnings or share that news for everyone to see. My biggest piece of advice, I think if we looked at this in two parts as well, from a competition standpoint, I think from when I used to compete, I always used to think that I had to portray myself in a certain way, or not necessarily change my behaviour or who I am completely, but in order to fit in or to be well respected as a competitor, there were certain things I was always really conscious of, and I'm not ever really convinced that I was completely myself. And what we're about is being inclusive to all, whoever you are, whatever you want to be. So I think that's a large piece of advice, to just make sure you're always yourself. I guess from an industry perspective, it's really crucial, especially if you're aspiring to get involved in esports. From a career perspective, is networking is always hugely underrated. I always felt like, even prior to joining Esports Insider, that a lot of these networking events were for a certain seniority or for certain people, and didn't always feel like I was able to go to these type of events. I feel like networking, making those connections, has helped me massively, not in terms of character development, but also making great kind of connections with other people, female leaders within the space. So between networking and being yourself, I think that's, there's lots of pieces of advice I could probably give, but those two are the kind of main ones from my side. So if you'd like to reach out to Women in Esports, we do have open DMs on our Twitter page, which is womenin_esports. We also do have a Discord server, which can be found in our bio on Twitter. We do have a ticket system on Discord for anyone to ask anything at any time, and that goes through to the core team at Women in Esports. So feel free to reach out to any of us. So we've recently established some short-term and long-term objectives for women in esports moving forward. Whilst I've lightly touched on some of them today, we're really looking forward to sharing some future news with you over the next couple of months, and of course getting started in my new role as chair.